Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today we're going to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about how to properly do player relegation in Dungeons and Dragons, in my humble opinion. All right, let's go. All right, player relegation. What's that? All right, so we're going to talk about player relegation today, and we're going to define the whole thing. We're going to do who, what, when, where, why, and how. Okay, so what is it? What is player relegation? Player relegation is you as the dungeon master. I'm gonna give this for a game of 5 players with a 21 session campaign. Okay, and you could and you guys are smart enough to modify this if you have more or less players, or if you want to run more or less campaigns. But the structure is there, and you can just kind of turn the knobs if you need to. But I'll show you the structure for doing player relegation in a Dungeons and Dragons game with 5 players and a campaign length of 21 sessions. All right, let's go. All right, so what is player relegation? So I'm Scott Garibay. I'm an American, right? And we broke from America back in 1776 and said, nah, we ain't going to have a monarchy. And to this day, we keep very specific laws in place in America, so there will never ever be a king or queen over us, right? So I got a little bit of beef, with England overall. However, okay, even if a country is a rival to you, right? As an American, we can see that there are things of value in Britain, in the United Kingdom, right? Britain. When I say United Kingdom, I'm going to say Britain. I mean United Kingdom when I say Britain. All right. So one thing Britain does know is how to run a soccer league. Right? How to run a soccer organization or multiple soccer organizations. They're extremely good at it. They take soccer extremely seriously in the United Kingdom, right? And what they do in the United Kingdom is they do relegation of teams. They're like, so basically what they do is they're like, okay, we have all these teams in our soccer leagues, and if they underperform, they get kicked out. They're removed. We only allow top tier teams to play in the best leagues in the United Kingdom, the professional top tier leagues, right? And so they use relegation, right? And so I actually think, when it comes to soccer, Britain knows what they're doing, right? And they have a really good model that makes sure that only top tier teams are in play, right? And so what we can do is we can look at Dungeons and Dragons and say, okay, if we're serious about Dungeons and Dragons and we're playing top tier Dungeons and Dragons, we can use player relegation, which is you look at every single player, right? You rank them by metrics. You make those metrics. You establish at the beginning of the game, this is a player relegation game. So you're going to start in this game, in the first 7 sessions, I, the Dungeon Master, will rank you by 4 specific metrics. The player who comes and you'll get points for those metrics. The player who has the least points after session 7, get out, leave. You have underperformed. Your performance does not warrant you remaining in this game. Leave. This game is for top tier players. You did not play seriously enough. You did not drive enough. You did not improve enough. You do not belong here. Get out. That's player relegation, okay? All right, so that's what it is. Why should we use it, okay? No, let's do who first. Who do you use player relegation for? Okay, so player relegation, in my humble opinion, is only for Dungeons & Dragons 5e games. And the reason why is, so basically the world ranks, Dungeons & Dragons players, right? Who's the best Dungeons & Dragons player in the world? The world ranks dungeon masters. Who's the best dungeon master in the world right now? Unequivocally, it's Matthew Mercer. He has accomplished more than most dungeon masters can even remember, right? It's like he's clearly the best dungeon master in the world. Players are ranked as well, okay? And there are, so basically, Matthew Mercer and all of Critical Role are 5e players. So first of all, this should only be run for 5e. And the reason why is anyone playing a legacy game, they're playing that legacy game out of nostalgia or not wanting to do the hard work to play at the level of current Dungeons & Dragons, which demands more from Dungeon Masters and demands more from players than any legacy version ever did, right? So you can't have people who are like, oh, I want to make it like it was in the 80s, and I play Dungeons and Dragons for fun and comfort. This is for top tier dungeon masters and players. Don't even attempt this with any legacy, with any D&D 1E, 2E, 3E, 4E dungeon master. Should not be relegating players, because he's going to have subpar players because they don't play the current hardest, most challenging version of Dungeons and Dragons. So don't even attempt this with any kind of D&D legacy dungeon masters or players. Okay. By the way, only players are relegated. Dungeon masters aren't relegated in this model. Okay, but no legacy. You know, if you're a D&D legacy dungeon master, you're a tier 2 dungeon master right out of the gate. Just, you know, like, hey, nostalgia is important to me, and like, you know, like, you're not really a serious dungeon master if you're playing legacy versions. Second, don't even attempt this with any kind of an OSR game, and the reason why is those are copy games, you know, and again, people are going to them because they can't handle the pressure of D&D now, and there's a ton of pressure. There's more challenge on D&D 5e than any OSR game you'll find, right? The OSR games they're just kind of like chutes and ladders, right? You know, and so player relegation is going to put is going to put stress on you emotionally and intellectually, right? And no one in playing D&D Legacy or D&D or OSR is going to be able to withstand the emotional, intellectual impact of player relegation. So this should only be done, in my humble opinion, on D&D 5e. Okay, so you have a D&D 5e game. All right, so that's the who. Why? Why should this be done? This should be done for D&D farther. Okay, if you run a game where you're like, hey, we play for fun, do not attempt this. This is for people who are like, I want to take Dungeons and Dragons farther than it is now, and I want to allow Dungeons and Dragons to take me farther as a person than I want it to improve me as a person, right? If the function of your game is fun, do not even approach this. This is only for people who play at the highest tiers of Dungeons and Dragons, right? So that's why. So we've done who, why, and what. Okay, when. So this is going to be done. So the when of this, you announce it. You say, hey, I am starting a player relegation game. Okay, it's going to be 21 sessions, and what you do is you bring your A team and your B team, right? So you're going to bring 5 players in, and you're going to say, you guys are A team, and then you're going to extend an invitation out to your B team and say, listen, B team, you guys haven't made it. You're not going to be at the table when we start, but at session 7, I'm going to relegate a player, and I will pull from you to replace that relegated player. Okay, all right. So you have 10. So you're starting with five players who will sit at the table on session 1. They will be at the table until session 7. 4 of them will remain at the table, on session 8 through 28 through on session 8, right? And then one of your players, you will tell them, listen, your performance has been subpar. You're at the bottom of the list. You are relegated. Please leave the table. Okay, all right. So basically, you go into it and you're moving forward. So. And that's your when. And then with each session, you will show them the metrics, right? And at the end of the session, you'll say, okay, these are the 4 metrics, and 4 of your players will win one of the metric titles, and then one of your players will get 0, right? And at the end, so each week they will know, currently I am in position of relegation, and when we hit 7, if I don't move my points up in the coming games, I will be relegated. Okay. Also, if you reach a point where one player is so far behind that they cannot catch up, you can relegate them immediately. Okay. And then once relegation is done, player relegation is done, and you've said your performance is subpar, you have not matched the level of performance of the rest of the players at this table, you must leave immediately. Right. At that point, you're going to have 7 sessions where there's no relegation, and everybody can just relax and play the game. Okay. Then, finally, when you're done with that 7 session player space, you can then move into a system where you can say, okay, now we're going into the last remaining sessions after the relegation, and then a 7 session safe zone. And I'm telling you all right now, I'm going to start ranking you again. And when this campaign is done, when we've reached the end of this campaign at session 21, I'm going to relegate another one of you. Right, and it could be the new player, it could be one of the existing players, and then and then the players who are not relegated will form the new team for a future campaign if there's going for the next campaign, which could be a completely different setting. It may not even be connected to the same setting. It'll just be D&D 5e again. Okay, so that is the when. So we've done who, when, why, and what. Okay, so we need to do the where and how. So this is going to be at your physical table. That's another thing. If you're playing a streamer game, right, your commitment to Dungeons & Dragons is too low. Don't attempt this with any streamer game, right? Serious games happen at physical tables. That's the people who are honoring Gary Gygax. That's the people who, their games matter, right? It's not just whoever they could pull together on the internet, right? This is for, people who use printed books and sit down at a real table and are playing with real people, right? Like it's real D&D. That's what I'm saying, right? So the where. Let's get, so who, what, when, where, why, and now we just need to do the how. So I'll give you the metrics, okay? So it's snap. You are looking for mastery. At the end of each game, you will weigh every single player with the following metrics. So basically, you'll put all of these into a hat, okay? Snap. It is the mastery of system, mastery of narrative, mastery of players, mastery of pillars, okay? So let me explain these. System mastery, that's old as dirt. It's the mastery of the game's rules, knowing like the right subclasses, the right builds, how to deal damage, knowing what spells to cast. System mastery is knowledge of the rules of your class, your race, and your background, and using them optimally. Okay. All right. Next is narrative. Okay. Narrative mastery is: are you driving the story in interesting ways? Are you honoring what's on the dice? Are you trying to get the dungeon master to? Are you whining about a dice roll and asking the dungeon master to do a retroactive change? Narrative is building a story with the dungeon master, with the other players, and with the dice, and understanding that the story is a preeminent element of Dungeons & Dragons. Narrative, right? Are you bringing interesting, like, do you say, I attack and I do 12 damage. Out! No, you say, hey, my character runs forward at the orc in front of me. I draw my longsword. I slash toward his heart, right? Here's my roll. This is the result on the die, and the result on the die is the following. The number on the die is the following. These are my bonuses. This is my result. What happens, Dungeon Master? That, not like, I do my attack, do 12 damage, blah, 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 right? Out, done, gone. That's why we need player relegation, right? All right, so narrative, right? And infusing narrative at every level, okay? And honoring the narrative and valuing the narrative, right? The story, right? Player mastery. Are you looking to bring out backstory for the other players? Are you looking to sacrifice and save them rather than try to get one more attack in on the monster and create the finishing blow? Do you go, when one of your player characters on their second failed death save, are you rushing across the field to aid them, right? Or are you just, let me get one more, I can do 80 points of damage? Player engagement. If somebody forgets their pencil, do you have an extra pencil? And here's a pencil sharpener, right? If their dice are just super cold, do you have an extra set of dice to hand them over? Or do you switch dice with them? Do you sacrifice? Player mastery. Last is pillar mastery. Combat, interaction, exploration. Are you driving each player to explore every pillar? Are you delving deep into every pillar yourself, right? Are you making decisions with your characters that open up exploration? Are you making decisions with your character that open up, really exciting, like philosophical conversations and interactions with the non-player characters, right? And are you performing well on combat? Are you doing all three pillars and mastering all three pillars? Player relegation, right? Get scrubs gone. Exactly the way they do it in the UK soccer leagues. This is for top tier dungeon masters, top tier Dungeons Dragons players, which fundamentally means Dungeons Dragons 5th edition games. That's how, in my humble opinion, you do player relegation. How would you do player relegation? I'd love to hear if you would modify this in any, how you would modify this process. All that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.